Good morning, everybody. Enter the stars. Here with our daily live shows every day, this time, exactly, or close to it. we do these live shows during the week. So I appreciate all the new subscribers to the channel. A lot of new faces, and I welcome each and every one of you. And today we're going to look at this creepy SARS pandemic scenario. Now, this is crazy because one of you sent this to me last week, and I'm glad we're going to finally be able to get into this in today's show. This is Johns Hopkins University, okay? And it's called a futuristic scenario for public health risk communicators. It was written in 2017, or at least published in 2017, but it depicts a scenario that seems to match what's happening right now. Now, this is crazy because it was written in 2017, and the setting is a date 8 years in the future. The document's 88 pages long, and it covers a time frame to 2028, which of course 2/8 is 88. So there's a lot of 88s going on with this scenario. And you have to ask yourself, how many more of these live action exercises are we going to have to see to realize that all of this seems to be planned? Now, in this scenario, an outbreak occurs, of course, and they have this VC that's called COROVAX. They quickly produce it, and it's followed by adverse events that cause mental retardation in children. And this sends shockwaves through the truth community. They actually have a truth community mentioned in this paper. We're going to go over all this in detail. And social media. They address censorship. They talk about public safety. They talk about misinformation. VC injury. There's even a hydrochloroquine component to this, a medicine that they try to get to everyone to take. It's supposed to help with symptoms, and it's controversial, and all this stuff is covered in here. And then later in the paper, they talk about naturopaths and alternative medicine, and they even talk about YouTube channels. This is crazy. The list goes on. Now, let's get into this 88-page paper. Without the cover, of course, it's 88 pages. Written 8 years in the future from its publication and ending in 2028. We're going to start with this cryptic disclaimer on page 6. Now, for the purposes of this show, we're going by the numbers that you see up here, okay? For page numbers versus the numbers that you see on the pages. And that's just so that you don't get confused when you go back to this for future reference. So we go to page 6. And there's a disclaimer. Let's read this. This is a hypothetical scenario designed to illustrate the public health risk communication challenges that could potentially emerge during a naturally occurring infectious disease outbreak requiring development and distribution of novel and/or investigational drugs, VCs, therapeutics, and other medical countermeasures. So basically, this entire paper is about misinformation, disinformation, under their definition of it, right? The infectious pathogen, medical countermeasures, characters, news media excerpts, and social media posts and government agency responses described herein are entirely fictional. But really, it's not, because I'm going to show you that to you right now. Now, we're going to skip to page 10. Challenging their technological grip. Let's go here. This is in the preface still. Challenging their technological grip, however, are the diversity, let's back up here, social media technologies, including long existing platforms such as Facebook, Snapchat, and Twitter, as well as emerging platforms like ZapQ, whatever that is. Some of these are fictional. A platform that enables users to aggregate and archive selected media content from other platforms, and communicate with cloud-based social groups based on common interests and current events. Federal and state public health organizations have also developed agency-specific applications and ramped up efforts to maintain and update agency websites. Challenging their technological grip, however, are the diversity of new information. They see this as a threat, is what they're describing this in the paper. Are the diversity of new information and media platforms and the speed with which the social media community evolves. That's all of us, you guys. Moreover, while technologically savvy and capable, these agencies still lag in terms of their multilingual skills, cultural competence. So they're talking about the countermeasures that the powers that be are implementing in social media to counteract the people, which is all of us in social media, and to maintain control. I mean, this is basically doublespeak for that. They're talking about their challenges in their ability to present on all forms of social media. Additionally, these agencies face considerable budget constraints. I don't think so. Look at the budget constraints we have to deal with as independent investigators. Many of us are working on bare bones budgets of almost nothing, trying to get this information out. And they're complaining because they have billions and billions of dollars in the CDC and the NIH and all this, and they're saying they've got budget constraints. You got to be kidding me. And it says, which further complicate their efforts to expand their presence across the aforementioned platforms. Yeah, try creating that out of nothing with no budget. You know, I've got a Twitter account and a Facebook group, and you know, try doing it with zero budget. Okay, these people couldn't create a social media platform to save their lives because people don't subscribe to that. They don't want that. So what they're talking about here is artificially creating a footprint on social media to control people's minds. Increase social media literacy among their communication workforces, improve public uptake of key messages. This scenario was designed to illustrate the public health risk communication challenges associated with the distribution of emergency medical countermeasures during an infectious disease spamdemic. The story is organized chronologically, and each chapter concludes with the treatment of key communication dilemmas. You're going to see that. They're going to talk about how they can continue to brainwash people in these key communication dilemmas at the end of each chapter. As such, users may find it helpful to run the scenario as a tabletop exercise. So this is like a training thing for these people. Let's skip over to page 12. Look at all this. This is crazy. The spamdemic begins. So this is the beginning of the scenario, right? And it starts out with 3 deaths. And they even call it a novel C virus, right? Imagine that, right? That's what they call it. Just like they called this one a novel. This was 2017, you guys. And then on page 14, as if they thought we wouldn't pick up on this, they talk about a 0.6% mortality rate, which is about the same as what we're dealing with now. But as you're going to see as the paper unfolds, basically it starts out with a much higher rate, and then as time goes on and more information comes in, they realize that it's only a 0.6% or lower rate, which is exactly what's happening right now. In the whole time in this paper, they're trying to discredit the people that were trying to say since the beginning that this was less than 1% mortality rate. Do you see how this works? So you can't discredit the truth. The truth will always come out. And of course, we know they're assigning more deaths that aren't supposed to be assigned to this number. So it's probably even far lower. So here it says, as a result, early case fatality estimates were inflated They admit it right here. By late November, CDC reported an initial estimated SARS case fatality rate of 4.7. By contrast, the WHO reported the overall case fatality was 14 to 15% and over 50% for aged people over 64. Later in the SARS outbreak, data that included more accurate estimates of mild SARS cases indicated a case fatality rate of only 0.6%. They're telling you the truth right here in this paper. Now, let's read on page 15 because they start to dovetail in the social media impact of all this. Communication dilemma. Endangering public trust and a sense of self-efficacy when a crisis is still evolving and health information is incomplete. Food for thought. How can health authorities best meet public demands for critical information, such as what is the health threat and what do I know about it, when the crisis is still unfolding and not all the facts are known? We kept hearing this, right? They kept telling us, hey, let us take care of this. We're the professionals. This is still unfolding. We don't know what's going to happen, even though most people in truth community were saying, oh, this is just going to be the same as a regular flu season. It's about 1% or less. It's exactly what we're dealing with. Okay. What benefits does monitoring trends in social media postings confer on efforts to meet people's information needs? They're monitoring trends in social media. This is part of the scenario. That's a little bit creepy. Let's keep going with this. Now, we get on to page 17 here. And it's interesting because they explain that social distancing is ineffective against this SARS virus, right? Let's get down to that part. Let's make this a little bit smaller. Here we go. By mid-December, SARS cases were reported in 26 states, and the ministries of health in Mexico, Canada, Brazil, Japan, and several European countries had notified the WHO of dozens of imported cases. There was widespread concern in public health circles that travel over the Christmas and New Year's holidays would spark a global spamdemic. WHO, which had declared SARS epidemic to be blah blah blah, was actively engaged in preventing further spread of the disease internationally. However, the WHO's efforts promoted interventions originally designed for influenza and other similar respiratory pathogens, such as hygiene, social distancing, and isolation of suspected cases, all of which were less effective against SARS. Interesting, right? So this goes on. Now, they mentioned this treatment called calosivir, okay? And this to me sounds a lot like hydrochloroquine as you see this scenario unfold. And why? Because this particular calosivir this treatment is rejected by many, but also accepted by most. Let's do it. Let's do a page search on calosivir before we continue on here, so I could show you what's going on with this. At the time, no treatment or VC for SARS was approved for use in humans. Oh, this is interesting. The word calosivir appears 77 times. Another Trump reference. Now, this paper released during Trump's presidency, but isn't it interesting how he's pushing the hydrochloroquine, which, by the way, appeared a decade ago in a TV show written on a whiteboard to treat a virus that was going around in this episode of this show. Okay, so don't get it twisted. All right, the hydrochloroquine is no answer to anything. It's just part of the play. It's part of all this. It's part of the play that they're putting on for us. Okay, if it wasn't, it wouldn't have been in that TV show. But here it is, calosivir, initially developed as a therapeutic for severe acute respiratory syndrome, was one of several antiviral drugs authorized in the United States by the FDA to treat a handful of severe SARS cases. So this goes on, and it becomes a central theme in this scenario. Shortly after authorizing expanded access to Calcivir for select patients, the FDA received reports of an animal vaccine. I can't say that word, right? So this goes on. So they issued an emergency use authorization. This was what Trump was trying to get passed, right? For the approval of Calcivir and hydrochloroquine. Okay. This goes on and on and on. So I wanted to establish that. And finally, now comes the VC. The VC launches on page 20. And let's take a look here. And it's called COROVAX. I'm going to page search it. Which sounds a lot like, you know what? I mean, you can't make this up, you guys. All right, let's go back here. I'll go back to page 20. Now, I took some notes on this because this is a huge paper. I don't want to go through the entire paper, but I wanted to hit the kind of the highlights so you guys could see what's going on with this. The main talking points from the paper. Shortly after expanded access, so we already read the part. So check this out. It starts talking about this data that was provided by GMI, suggested that the VC was effective at preventing this illness in cows, pigs, and hooved animals. That's weird. But internal trials revealed several worrisome side effects, including swollen legs, severe joint pain, encephalitis, leading to seizures and death. Because many animals experience these side effects, were immediately killed, and because animals were typically slaughtered within a year of VC, further information regarding the short and long-term effects of the GMI VC was unavailable. Lacking a viable alternative and considering the potentially high morbidity and mortality associated with SARS, the U.S. government contacted GMI in regards to the VC. After laboratory tests confirmed that the CV affecting livestock in Southeast Asia was closely related to SARS, the U.S. began an extensive review of the GMI's animal VC development. So they basically passed this anyway, as part of an emergency, even though they knew it was causing these side effects in animals. Now, this Calcivir is a treatment, just like hydrochloroquine. It's not the VC. It's just a treatment. I want to be clear on that. Let's keep going with this. And now we're going to look at this last paragraph on page 20. It also provided considerable funding from the National Institutes of Health, and including provisions for priority review by the FDA. Additionally, HHS Secretary Nagel agreed in principle to invoke the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act. Now, I think this is like the president and his cabinet. So this would be comparable to Trump and his cabinet. And look, what did we have? A national emergency that was declared, thereby providing liability protection for SynBio and future VC providers in the event that VC recipients experience any adverse events. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Then on page 22, they expand on this Calcivir drug. Look at this. Now, obviously, this didn't happen. Trump got stopped in his tracks with hydrochloroquine. Following limited evidence of success in treating SARS patients with Calcivir, the FDA issued an emergency use authorization for this drug as SARS therapeutic in the US. While Clesivir had a positive impact, preliminary data indicated it also caused intense stomach cramping in a statistically significant number of adult cases. Additionally, while initial hopes had been that Clesivir would, in addition, treat the disease, prevent or reduce transmission, this was not the case. Nevertheless, due to the high public demand for access to viable treatments, public health and healthcare agencies drew from existing inventories. So they started handing out this drug in this scenario. And again, all this sounds a lot like the hydrochloroquine debate, the controversy surrounding it. Skip to page 24. Now, in here they talk about small groups of individuals spread throughout the country who felt that natural cures such as garlic and vitamins would be more effective in treating SARS. Now, this is interesting because they're dovetailing in this naturopathic scenario. They realize that this is something that they don't have control over, and they want to. They don't want people to have self-control over their own health. And that's a little bit scary to me because a lot of people don't want a cradle to grave existence. We as human beings should have the right to, even if it caused our own demise, we should be able to reject certain things that otherwise would be forced upon us. And this is the problem with this scenario that they're trying to unleash on us. Now, it talks here that the natural cures, garlic and vitamins, and it's interesting because none of this is being talked about as recommended treatment or augmentation of what they're trying to force us to do. So they want to talk about masks and social distancing and all these other things, but they won't talk about just keeping yourself healthy. Where is the, if they're going to force someone to do something, how about exercise and eating right and this and that? I mean, I'm not open to any form of control, but wouldn't it be more palatable if they said, okay, we're closing down the fast food restaurants and we're just going to do drive-through vegetable stops, right? And protein and low-fat options and alternatives, because this is going to help decrease the rate, flatten the curve, right? That would be more palatable to a lot of people and be more realistic than what they're doing now in trying to attribute and attach the success of fighting this thing to a mask and a social distance, which makes absolutely no sense when there's so many other things you could be doing. Sunlight, exercise, vitamin C, right? But instead they punish the people that are trying to relay that message, the health message to all this. And the reason why they can't do that and they won't do that is because that's our economy. That's the American economy. McDonald's, Burger King is the American economy. This is how they keep us asleep. These are the bars of our prison. And so think about that for a second. How sick that is and how hypocritical that is for them to completely ignore all of the other things that could help you have a healthy immune system and pin it all on everything that's going to make them money. A face mask, social distancing, a VC, right? Which has absolutely very little to do. Why do you think young people aren't quote unquote affected by this? And I think this is all BS. I think the whole thing is fake. But let's for a second imagine that it is real. Why do you think young people don't get it? Because they have healthier immune systems. Right? This is all common sense. So why wouldn't the powers that be promoting a healthy immune system? They're not. Because this is not about saving people's lives. This is about control. So they talk about this person. Now, let's get back into this. Went off on a tangent there. So, in addition, not all members of the public responded to SPARS in the same way. These small groups had this garlic, natural cures, and vitamins. They were much less likely to accept Calycivir as a treatment option or even seek medical attention for any symptoms. Similarly, some ethnic minorities, and particularly ethnic groups who live close together in large, tight-knit communities, also rejected Calycivir. Some of this resistance, particularly among select ethnic minority groups, was attributable to questionable messaging on the part of public health agencies. While news reports and press releases were provided in multiple languages, not all of the messages were culturally appropriate for populations receiving them. One of the best examples of this occurred among the Navajo tribe. Now, this is where the plot thickens, because one of you, a subscriber, came into the comment section on a video I did a couple videos ago and were claiming that this was real, that you lived on a reservation, and a bunch of people that you knew personally fell out. And I asked you for proof or evidence of that, maybe your Facebook page, posts from the people that died, and well wishes to their family and all that kind of stuff. But then it brought up a point. Many of these scenarios, like the one that we covered last week, same type of paper that we're looking at today, many of these scenarios contain a Native American component, which is weird. Just like Bush's 2006 spamdemic scenario. They talked about tribes and Native Americans. They're such a small percentage of the United States population. Why would they keep including Native Americans and African Americans, for that matter, in these scenarios? You're going to see the African American community also mentioned in this scenario. I think it was mentioned in Bush's scenario as well. It's because they are part of the target. That's why they have to include this. And in this paper, it almost appears as though they're trying to blame them for the outbreak of these scenarios in the Native American community because they were not accepting of the messaging and didn't even go in, even if they were having symptoms. This is creepy stuff, you guys. We're actually seeing past the veil. These people know exactly what they're doing. Now, let's hop over to page 12. Let's make sure we're connected first. Then we'll continue on with this. Appears as though we are. Let's let this catch up. Okay, very good. If you guys have questions on this, or you have certain words you want me to search in this document, we can do that at the end of the show. Let's get through the paper first. Page 27. Now, here they start getting into the impact that social media has on people's fears. Okay, going viral, right? And surrounding the treatment drugs that they came up with, Calycivir. Reports of negative effects associated with Calycivir began gaining traction in February. Despite the negative response, public health agencies continue to make progress until February, when a video of a 3-year-old boy in North Carolina who was hospitalized with SPARS and began projectile vomiting immediately after he took a dose of Calycivir. So they're like, oh, this was an isolated incident. This isn't even one of the side effects of Calycivir. And so they write it off, and they talk about the dangers of allowing social media to let this stuff go viral. It's very clear what they're doing here. Very, very clear what they're doing here. Now let's hop over to page 33. And they admit that social media was right. Look at this. The Voice. It says this figure matched public sentiment widely expressed on social media that SPARS was not as dangerous as originally thought, with a death rate of 0.6%. Why would government feel the need to overcome our disinterest? You guys, that's a lower rate than the murder rate, which they seem to care nothing about. it's a lower rate than almost any other communicable disease that they do absolutely nothing about. So why do they care about the seasonal flu? Here it is right here. All right, so people are onto it. They admit that that's a scenario. They admit that it's true. And let's keep going here. It says here, in an effort to further reach certain population subgroups, agency officials enlisted the help of well-known scientists, celebrities, and government officials to make short videos and zap clips, and in a few cases, give interviews to major media outlets. Among those chosen was former President Jacqueline Bennett. These are all fictional characters. BZ, a popular hip-hop star. It kind of sounds like Beyonce and Jay-Z combined, right? Which is kind of weird. Here it is here. So, they admit that they use celebrities to mind control people. It's basically what they're saying here. Now, let's hop over to page 34, because this, in the scenario, this backfires on them. Because this BZ guy, Beyonce and Jay-Z combined, right? This is funny. He mentions the Tuskegee experiments, which, of course, is where they gave black people syphilis without telling them. This happened in our century, a century before. The government did this. How can you ever trust anybody? So they talk about this here. BZ's original zap clip was widely shared, particularly among African American and urban populations. However, in an interview aired on Access Hollywood, during which he was asked about the accelerated clinical trials for COROVAX, BZ noted his admiration for those who volunteered to participate in the trials, and then compared these recent volunteers to volunteers in previous health-related studies, including the men who volunteered at Tuskegee. You got to be kidding me. So this backfires on them. I mean, this is just like Twilight Zone stuff right here. Now, one thing I noticed as I was going through this paper was that the paper assumes that this virus can just magically survive all 4 seasons. You guys, that's not realistic. What virus do you know that survives all 4 seasons? There's a die-off. But yet we're told that it just leapfrogs over into the next season. We're never given a break. The rules remain in place. You know, how about some time out? How about, oh, okay, it's time out time. Business as usual. You see how this works? So now we're going to hop over to page 45. We're about 3/4 of the way through this show, and then we'll open it up for word searches. I did not search the word mask yet, or face covering, so we'll take a look and see if that appears in the document. Now this headline says it all. Standing in line, protesting online, chapter 11. But this is counterintuitive to what the paper said earlier about people's concerns diminishing when they saw the actual mortality rate. Let's read this page. To determine how to best distribute limited doses of COROVAX to members of priority groups across the country, U.S. government resorted to new controversial tactics, notably having healthcare providers access patients' electronic health records to determine the number of individuals in high-risk populations receiving care in particular areas. Does this sound familiar? Remember Project Nightingale? Google working with Ascension Hospital Group? Uploading your personal medical data to the cloud and possibly using that in contact tracing? Well, it was all talked about in this scenario. Due to widespread increases in EHR, electronic health records, use since 2020, This method proved to be highly effective. Oh, do you think that was an accident that they switched everything to electronic health records just in time for the first spamdemic, right? You see how all this works? Enabling providers to quickly tabulate the number of pregnant women and young adults with chronic respiratory conditions. Some communities like LA, this method has also identified neighborhoods with limited access to primary care. So they're basically demographically profiling you. And you could find yourself profiled and actions taken against you as a human being, certain rights taken away, just because you were profiled in a certain group. The use of electronic health records was not without controversy, however. Some U.S. citizens were upset. They believed the federal government was accessing private patient data. Yeah, Project Nightingale. This stemmed from a misunderstanding on the citizens' part. No, not so much. The federal government was not accessing patients' EHRs directly, but rather was relying on healthcare organizations and providers to access patients' EHR and then report summary information. I didn't eat the cookie, my hand did. Unbelievable. Specifically, the number of people in the targeted groups to the CDC, FDA, and other government agencies. U.S. government attempted to rectify this misunderstanding by posting, tweeting, and zapping short statements and videos explaining the VC distribution process. These messages successfully reached citizens who subscribed to government news feeds. Critically, however, these messages failed to reach a small but growing segment of the U.S. population, obtaining information from non-government sources. See how this works? This is how they view all of us. So then we go to something very weird on page 48. A blackout. And a dam is mentioned. Look at this. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Grant County Health District will provide COROVAX for the general public on July 9th, 2026, a week before COROVAX was released for distribution. The power grid at the Grand Coulee Dam in eastern Washington state experienced a catastrophic failure. Now, they don't say a dam breach or break. They just say that there was some kind of blackout. While the event did not destroy any infrastructure or result in any deaths, it did cause widespread power outages in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana. Now, we haven't seen this widespread yet, but I can tell you last week, I lost power for like 4 days here in Connecticut because of Hurricane Isaias. Says here, though power was restored within a day of the initial outage, blackouts continued plaguing this area over the next 3 weeks. So, because summer temperatures in this region are typically moderate and adequate numbers of emergency generators existed for hospitals and other public facilities, there was no significant public health concerns associated with the event. So, will there be a blackout scenario? It's been talked about a lot in the truth community. Now, on page 51, they cover the people opposed to the VCs, and that would be all of us, right? Lovers and haters. Early on in the COROVAX VC campaign, anti-VC groups began emerging on social media platforms. These groups initially came from 4 primary sources: Muslim groups across the country, this is laughable, who opposed the VC on the basis that the original formulation was used to treat pigs. See how they're just goofing on people? They're just goofing. African Americans, remember I told you that the African American component was part of this as well, who refused VC based on continued fear of governmental experimentation on African American populations. And this is ridiculous. Like, I'm a black person and nobody I know talks about Tuskegee. Most black people are sold out to the left and they believe whatever the Democrats tell them, although there is a growing group that are more right-leaning, but they're still being used by both sides, the right-left paradigm, and don't even understand that they're both 2 sides of the same coin. who just use black people as a pawn in their drama to create chaos and to cause fear and worsen the race divide. So this is ridiculous. This assertion here that the reason why black people don't take vaccines is because they are afraid of the Tuskegee experiment and that's just retarded. So, and then it says alternative medicine proponents who had also been active in campaigning against Closivir and anti-VC activists who were galvanized by the anti-VC sentiment. This is getting so convoluted and confusing. Associated with the national measles outbreak in 2015. Okay. Now this is weird because wasn't there a measles thing going on after Trump took office? And he was telling everyone that they need to be VC'd. This was in New York just before all this popped off. So this kind of like predicted that, doesn't it? With the exception of the last group, none of the anti-VC movements were cohesively organized initially, existing primarily in small isolated pockets across the country. The general anti-VC proponents, however, existed as a core national group long before the sparse spamdemic. Following the 2015 measles outbreak in the U.S., this group united online. Oh, you can't unite online. By 2016, they had created several primary Facebook groups and numerous Twitter accounts. We must root out terrorism, and began using hashtags like no VCs for me and VCs kill. The anti-VC movement migrated to ZapQ upon its emergence in 2022 due to the ability to combine feeds from. So this is just retarded, right? You can see just by the way they're talking about this, how they really feel about people who think freely for themselves. And would you trust someone who feels that way about you to give you a VC? I wouldn't. And this is why they had to choose Trump to launch this. Because if this came from the left, nobody would take it. The other reason why I reject this scenario is because there are a lot more people than isolated pockets across the country who don't want to take a VC. It's about 50%. Only 50% of people go and take a VC. So that's not isolated pockets across the country. So this is a false scenario. They talk about propaganda in here. When COROVAX distribution began, the anti-VC movement mobilized their resources, citing select quotes from the CDC, NIH, and other government agencies. Anti-VC proponents began spreading the message that COROVAX was inadequately tested and had unknown long-term effects. So they're admitting that their own papers, their own quotes and papers talk about the dangers. But when we use them, we're discredited. And that natural immunity resulting from contracting the disease was a more effective means of conferring protection. It is. Many of these messages also contain suggestions regarding how to manage SARS symptoms. The anti-VC movement, its ubiquity, motivation to prevent VC injury, and social media expertise meant that numerous Americans heard their message. I thought we lived in a free country where the messages that are correct and relevant are supposed to be allowed to proliferate. And the public will decide if they're true or not through their own social media construct that they created with their ratings and thumbs up and popularity, right? Isn't that the way it was all supposed to work? Well, now they're changing the rules. Now it doesn't matter how many thumbs up you have or how many subscribers you have. Now it's misinformation. National polls conducted in mid-August showed that 68% of U.S. citizens had seen a post or read a comment. Oh, it's poison. From someone expressing anti-CV sentiments. It's a sentiment now. Unbelievable. Now, Where are we at with this? Now, I'll post this in the pinned comment, of course. On page 53, they actually mentioned Black Lives Matter. Wow. All right, let's go down here and find that in here. Despite the failure of federal initiatives, some local public health departments were able to effectively address concerns of local Muslim populations. Why are they bringing up these very small minority groups in this scenario? It's because they will become part of the scenario. Wouldn't be shocked if they had some kind of false flag operation involving Muslims, and they'll make up this whole, and they'll play out this whole scenario that we're reading about right now, and then bring in the pig thing and all that. In King County, Washington, for example, local public health officials became aware of the concerns of local Somali Muslim population in early August. Acknowledging the authority held by local imams, these officials held community meetings with the local Somali leaders to engage the local community and posted culturally relevant information on a website specifically designed for their Somali Muslim constituents. All right, let's go down in here. It says here, in some areas, aggressive public health VC campaigns were locally interpreted as direct examples of experimentation, repurposing hashtags like Black Lives Matter. Some African Americans in these communities began to actively campaign against COROVAX. Through August 2026, anti-VCs, Muslims, and African Americans remain largely isolated from one another. By early September, however, continued anger over electronic health record use and growing concern over COROVAX side effects spurred these once disparate groups to join forces, with the alternative medicine proponents still campaigning against Calicivir. Uniting their efforts, these groups began sharing common anti-VC messages through a variety of social media channels, including Facebook, Tumblr, Snapchat, YouTube, and ZapQ forums, as well as local radio announcements. Some anti-VC groups also began crowdsourcing information about VC distribution sites to state local anti-VC protests. These protests, along with anti-VC messages shared by the supergroup, subsequently received wide national coverage through traditional media outlets, including local and national television news channels. That's kind of like what happened with this whole Black Lives Matter and all this looting and rioting, right? See how that dovetails in with that? While the U.S. government attempted to respond to claims raised by the anti-VC supergroup, their message did not reach many members of the anti-VC groups because they had already tailored their social media and news feeds to reflect only the opinions of those with whom they agreed. This is the echo chamber argument that they try to argue. Even though they are the biggest echo chamber of the freaking world, repeating and echoing across all of their mainstream media platforms the same exact message with a straight face. They're saying that us, the disorganized and unfunded, you're lucky if you get 100 subscribers, alternative media is the threat. You see how this works? They control everything, but they can't stand it when we unite on a message. Rather than figure out what our message is, they have to shut it down, silence us, and try to discredit us. So, this should seal the deal for those of you that are still in denial about how the powers that be work, what their goal is. This should help seal the deal. Now, let's hop over to page 57. I know this is a long paper, but I try to do a good job of narrowing this down for you guys. The grass is always greener. World Herald. In September 2026, 2 months after the first batches of COROVAX were released in the U.S., Japan, look, they got the Japan factor, right? Japan really didn't social distance. They didn't shut down their economy. They don't have a lot of cases. Japan announced that it would not approve the VC for use in Japan due to concerns that it has not been vetted properly through full clinical trials. Operation Warp Speed, fast tracking clinical trials. It's exactly what this scenario is talking about. Preliminary COROVAX trials conducted in Japan had shown that the VC was effective at preventing SARS and that the incidence of immediate side effects was minimal. However, significant concerns remain about the possibility of chronic long-term side effects based on the data from the original GMI VC. As an alternative, the Japanese government stated that they would continue the development of an alternative VC, which they suspected to become available in 2027. So, that's weird. Page 65. Now, this is exactly how they view us. Like this woman, Alyssa. Says here, having dealt with multiple communication issues over the course of the SARS pandemic, federal leaders successfully applied communication lessons learned from past failures and coordinated a rapid and effective response, despite the stubborn persistence of the echo chamber, where increasingly connected individuals persistently chose to only listen to opinions that mirrored their own. That's not what's happening here. Let me explain to you what's happening in alternative media. The people and the messages who resonate and who are true rise to the top. Those messages that are not true get discredited and those channels remain small. Okay, that's how this works. Or what you can have is the powers that be playing chess with social media and allowing the misinformation channels to become very large. Alex Jones is a perfect example. They allowed the most retarded, just obnoxious person that they could think of and find to rise to the top. Why? Because that automatically discredits the alternative media. I don't care what you say about how Alex Jones woke you up, okay? I don't care what you say about that, because at the end of the day, they picked a person that was basically partially insane so that our message could never fully be heard or fully be believed because it's coming from his mouth. That is CIA 101. That's what they do. That's how they co-opt movements. Okay? This isn't me making this up. This is how they do it. The person that is the mouthpiece may not even know they're being used in this way. But this is why they keep channels like this one very small, because we keep a level head. We present very detailed and accurate information. We never ever say this is that 100%. We say use your opinion. And therefore, we come across as more legitimate. And so they can never let a channel like this go mainstream or be anywhere close to a leader in this community, because we would actually change things. We would actually expose things. They can't have that. They need to control it. So, this is hogwash. Let's keep going with this. Not all opinions remain static throughout the SARS pandemic. In January, Alyssa Karpowicz, one of the most outspoken anti-Calcivir and anti-COROVAX activists and a leader in the natural medicine movement, had an experience that changed her stance on the use of expired antibiotics. Her youngest son, Lennon, contracted a mild case of SARS and experienced few complications. But several months later, he had developed a severe case of post-SARS bacterial pneumonia. Alyssa attempted to treat Lennon with a variety of natural medications, but his condition deteriorated. Desperate, she took him to her local emergency department where he was administered a dose of intravenous antibiotics deployed to the hospital from the SNS. As Alyssa later described, the effect was almost instantaneous. Within a day, my beautiful boy was back. As a result of the experience, Alyssa used all of her connections in the natural medicine in anti-VC circles to share her story and her newfound belief in the safety and effectiveness of expired antibiotics. While her message about the antibiotics being expired was erroneous, her outreach proved extremely effective. While many people who participated in these groups were no longer listening to official or even unofficial communications about the safety and effectiveness of the recommended pharmaceuticals, they were willing to listen to Alyssa. As a result, the opposition to expired antibiotics in the groups to which Alyssa belonged began to dissipate. So you see how this is how they frame us. We know a little bit, and we could make a difference with our reach, but we probably don't know enough to be safe, and so therefore our voice should be taken away. When government health authorities became aware of the impact of Alyssa's story on her followers and others who heard about her son's recovery, they began to expand their use of social media to gather accounts of positive experiences with COROVAX and antibiotics used to treat post-SARS pneumonia. The CDC in particular began mining data from public social media sources for positive stories they could include in their new outreach efforts. This, what I just read, is a veiled threat, because they're reframing this as looking for positive stories, but really what they're looking for is people that are going against their messaging. Okay. While limited to individuals who are still receiving messages from the CDC or news outlets that reported information from the CDC, the impact of these outreach efforts was positive. Wow. Page 68. We're almost done, you guys. VC injury, and this is where it all hits the road. This is chilling. They're telling you right here what can happen. In contrast to Alyssa Karpowitz's story, not all changes in opinion were in favor of public health messaging. As time passed, more people across the U.S. were VC'd. Claims of adverse side effects began to emerge. Several parents claimed that their children were experiencing neurological symptoms, similar to those seen among livestock exposed to the GMI VC. By May 2027, parental anxiety around this claim had intensified to the point of lawsuits. That month, a group of parents whose children developed mental retardation as a result of encephalitis, which is, I think that's brain swelling. In the wake of the COROVAX VC, sued the federal government, demanding removal of the liability shield, protecting the pharmaceutical companies responsible for developing and manufacturing COROVAX. The growing plaintiff cohort quickly withdrew their suit upon learning that the National VC Injury Compensation Trust Fund and the emergency appropriation of funds authorized by the Congress under the PrEP Act existed to provide financial reimbursement to those who were adversely affected by the COROVAX VC in order to cover healthcare costs and other related expenses. Given the positive reaction of the federal government's response and the fact that the majority of U.S. citizens willing to be VC'd had already been immunized, see, this is the plan. I don't care what you say. The plan is the majority, they want the majority of Americans VC'd. That's the plan. The negative publicity surrounding adverse reactions had little effect on nationwide VC rates. I don't think so. Focus on adverse side effects, however, resulted in a considerable increase in the number of compensation claims filed, and many grew concerned about the long-term effects that COROVAX could have on their health. This concern was particularly high among some African American parents who continued to question the government's motives regarding the COROVAX VC campaign. See this? These concerns that Black people are having about them being targeted by this virus, the CV virus, was already talked about in this paper. What are the odds, right? What are the odds? While the FDA, CDC, and other agencies were busy researching possible connections between COROVAX and the reported neurological side effects, their efforts were continually undermined by epidemiological analysis produced by various non-governmental individuals and groups. Wow. A popular science blogger, Epigirl. Oh, like epinephrine? Like adrenochrome? Wow. Began posting interactive maps of the incidence of COROVAX side effects. Kind of sounds like the spamdemic map, incidence map, right? To create the maps, Epigirl collected anecdotes of adverse COROVAX side effects using Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, combined them with data downloaded from the HHS VC Adverse Event Reporting System, a national VC safety surveillance program maintained by the CDC and the FDA. Epigirl also encouraged those among her subscribers who were Apple product users to share health data with her via Apple's research kit. Epigirl's maps were consequently shared widely in social media circles and even included in local and national news reports. Wow. Federal government became concerned about the validity of Epigirl's anecdotal data and the widespread sharing. Oh, you know, the mainstream media can report anecdotal data all they want. Every single story they post is anecdotal. We don't have any proof. Do we have proof that Jizwell is in jail? I have never seen any proof. That's anecdotal data to me. They won't release court records. I mean, there's court records, but those could all be faked. We need to see pictures. We need to see videotape of the cell being locked and the perp walk and the mugshot photos. That would be more proof. But yet, when Epigirl, God, I can't believe they named her this, epinephrine girl, when she shares her anecdotal data, it's discredited by the government, right? Let's keep reading. Government was concerned about her anecdotal data and the widespread sharing of patient information via the internet. Oh, you can't share patient information, but they can. They can share your patient information, but Epigirl can't. Epigirl's data showed a significantly higher incidence rate of nearly every reported side effect. However, federal officials believe that this was largely due to duplicate entries resulting from... This is exactly what they're doing. Duplicate entries resulting from compiling data from multiple sources. This is exactly what's happening with CV-19. Additionally, the Epigirl's data did not seek to address the cause of the reported side effects, only the incidence rate. Publication of similar results from organizations such as Patients Like Me, a group closely associated with the national medicine movement, further legitimized these independent reports. The government attempted to respond to these claims through formal press releases, but these were neither as visually appealing nor as interactive as Epigirl's maps. Oh, those maps. And were therefore largely ignored. And this has become a national security. This is against national security, so that something must be done, right? Because people are dying. While the federal government appeared to have appropriately addressed concerns around the acute side effects of COROVAX, the long-term chronic effects of the VC were still largely unknown. See, they admit that the long-term effects are unknown. Nearing the end of 2027, reports of new neurological symptoms began to emerge. After showing no adverse side effects for nearly a year, several VC recipients slowly began to experience symptoms such as blurry vision, headaches, and numbness in their extremities. Due to the small number of these cases, the significance of their association with COROVAX was never determined. Of course it'll never be determined. Why? Because the government runs medicine in America, and if they don't want it to be determined, then it won't be determined. That's how this works. That's why government control is so insidious, because they only will let things be determined that they want determined. I just can't even believe this. This makes me so angry. Okay, let's go down to page 75 as we begin to wrap this up. And this is called The Aftermath. Today, nearly 5 years since the St. Paul Acute Respiratory Syndrome CV made its global debut, there remain human cases in 14 countries across Europe, Africa, and Asia. The spamdemic officially ended in August 2028, but the virus persists in domesticated animal reservoirs. WHO experts hypothesize that small, isolated outbreaks of SARS were occurring long before the disease emerged on the global scale in 2025, and anticipated that future outbreaks will continue to emerge unless countries maintain widespread VC coverage. As the pandemic tapered off, several influential politicians and agency representatives came under fire for sensationalizing the severity of the event for perceived political gain. As with many public interventions, successful efforts to reduce the impact of the spamdemic created the illusion that the event was not nearly as serious as experts suggested it would be. President Archer's detractors in the Republican Party seized the opportunity to publicly disparage the president and his administration's response to the spamdemic. It's exactly what's happening right now with Trump. And don't get it twisted, it's all part of the right-left paradigm. Okay? They don't really hate Trump. They're just pretending to. Urging voters to elect a strong leader with the best interests of the American people at heart. Widespread social media movement led primarily by outspoken parents of affected children, coupled with widespread distrust of big pharma, supported the narrative that the development of SARS was unnecessary and driven by a few profit-seeking individuals. Conspiracy theories also proliferated across social media, suggesting that the virus had been purposely created and introduced to the population by drug companies, or that it had escaped from a government lab secretly testing bioweapons. It's just dead on, you guys. This is exactly what's happening right now. 2017, this paper came out. After action reports, government hearings, and agency reviews following the spamdemic were too numerous to count. Emergency funding appropriated by Congress to fight the disease became available partway through the course of the spamdemic. Okay, let's go down here. And this is where things go off the rail. This is the last page we're going to look at. And it appears in the document let's see here. On page 66, and there's that number again. And in frame, this is the clincher. 66, and there you see what appears to me to be a 5G whiz symbol. Can't make this up, you guys. You can't make this up. Donald Trump, the 5G whiz president. 66th floor penthouse. Whose Trump Tower looks like cell phone bar signals from the air. Now, I haven't got into the cause. I don't even believe any of this is real. So people that tell me that it is real and that it's caused by 5G whiz, I can't help you. I haven't dug into it. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying we have so much other work to do on this before convincing people that it was possibly caused by the signal. There's so many other things we could be talking about. It's almost like the whole flat earth thing. There's so many other things that need to be talked about, and we're spending a lot of time on the shape of the earth when there's all these things standing in front of us that we still can't convince people of. So there it is, page 66 on the document just below page 66. And this is the page called References and Appendices. And they show the cell phone signal there, the 5G whiz. Unbelievable. Now, we're going to do some page searches and I'll be in the chat. Let's do face. See if face coverings are mentioned anywhere in here. A lot of Facebook. I don't see face covering in here anywhere, you guys. Let's look up masks. I'll open this up and you guys can just put it in capital letters in the chat and I'll be in there in a second. Let me know what you'd like me to look up. I don't see any face coverings. Let's look up masks. Then we'll look up social distancing. Mask. Mask does not appear to appear. Social distancing. Distancing appears once. So they did use the term social distancing. Let's go in here. Pick you guys up off the floor. You guys are probably blown away by this information, and rightfully so. Almost the exact scenario. All the way down to the social media impact. Okay. Maybe Trump woke up just after he became president. No. He's all part of it, just a girl. You gotta wake up. That's why he has 66th floor penthouse in Trump Tower. This has been going on since the beginning. They choose these people carefully. In fact, they don't put anybody in power that they haven't already compromised. Why would they do that? Why would they let anybody reach the presidency that they haven't already compromised, that they don't already have dirt on, that they can't already control with their puppet strings? Nobody gets to the top, and there are so many glass ceilings in the way that none of us would ever be able to even reach that office. And that's how it works. And I love you with everything, but this is the truth. You gotta wake up. Because if you're not woke, then the lies just keep continuing. They're just going to keep continuing. Nothing will ever change. What do you think Egg Stain's entire operation was about? Compromising people that would be in power. That's why the Clintons owed him. He told one of his victims, he owes me. Of course he does. Because that's the whole thing. That's how they maintain control over the people that are in power. Yes, Trump is in charge of Operation Warp Speed, the rush to bring these VCs to market before his presidency ends. All right. People are still not getting it, Blue. Yeah, well, look, we got to try to be patient, but also we got to be firm. All right, any words you guys want me to search? Yeah, it's okay, Just a Girl. I'm not attacking you. I'm just, it's just the way it is. You know, it gets frustrating because we do this every single day during the week. We show impeccable evidence, unexplainable evidence every single day, and still people don't get it. So there's going to be some frustration. I just don't want you to get disenfranchised from the process. But yeah. No, I think actually Dr. Savage is a great moderator. ERM. Repeat what you have to say and maybe I'll decide if it's something that needs to say. We don't do attacks here. So if you do any attacks on people in the chat or on this channel, you're going to get your comment removed. So if you start saying like things that aren't true, then that's what will happen. But if you come with logical arguments, I can't imagine he would have removed you on purpose. So MAX stands for making all people sheeple kneel, says Catiladon. Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Wow. Yeah, you already said that, ERM. Just tell us what you want to communicate and we'll see it. Called me an idiot. Oh yeah, so yeah, you can't call the moderator an idiot. You're going to get blocked. So let's move on. Lockstep, lockdown. Yeah, let's look that up. Yeah, put your request, your word search requests in capitals so I can see it when it scrolls by. Lock does not appear anywhere in the document. Lock. Let's look up quarantine. Nope, does not appear. All right. Quarantine, lockdown. Nope, does not appear. Jack in the Box. Thanks, Tam Tam. Yeah, we got that figured out. You should be glad that he didn't block you from the channel. We have pretty much a zero tolerance policy here. There's just no time for it. There's no time for personal attacks. So, yeah. Yeah, Dr. Savage. Yeah, the trolls increase in number with the information being more relevant. What do you think will happen to those who refuse the VC, says Caleb? They're just going to make life really difficult. They might not make it mandatory, but they're going to really isolate you from society. And there may be some hard choices. There may be only one grocery store you can shop at. You might have to give up a few things. If you have children, I pray for you, because this whole school thing that's going to happen is going to be very challenging for you. You're going to have to make some hard choices about whether or not you're going to homeschool or you're going to allow them to force a VC on your child, because that they probably will force, because they're going to say it's for public safety and they're going to make it a requirement for your children to go to school. Think about how the landscape has changed. Just in the last year, we've been going through this. How before we had a religious exemption, well, that's all blown out of the water now. Because of how they've hyped up this whole CV-19, I can't imagine that any state is going to now allow the religious exemption. So just know that that's probably going to happen. These are things you need to think about. What are you going to do? Are you willing to homeschool your child? Do you have the means to homeschool your child? You should be preparing now. You should be talking to other parents, trying to get together a group. Find a parent who has the ability to teach a small group that's close to your house for a cost. It's going to cost you something. Are you starting to save now? Or are you just trusting that everything's going to work out and that you're going to have a choice? Well, if you're trusting everything's going to work out and you're going to have a choice, you're going to be sadly mistaken. You're going to find yourself backed into a corner, and then you're going to justify it in your mind that you're going to do it because you don't have a choice. Well, you have a choice now. You had a choice 3 months ago. You had a choice 6 months ago. You had a choice 9 months ago. You had a choice 2 years ago. We could have been preparing. So that's how this works. And in your heart, you don't need me to tell you. You have a conscience. And God talks to you all the time. And every time you make an excuse for why you don't want to change, why you don't want to believe this, or every time you make an excuse as to why you're going to give Trump the benefit of the doubt and trust the plan, every time you do that, you are just postponing the responsibility that you're going to have to face one day. And that is that it may be mandatory for your child to be VC'd with the CV just to get it back into school. Or that you may be required to do it just to show back up to work or enter a grocery store, and all the other gates that Trump will put in the way before they reopen the economy. The Janus Gate. All right, we're going to end the show there. Love each and every one of you. We'll be back on here tomorrow. We're going to talk about a particular episode of Star Trek that released in 1966, where the Enterprise had to reach warp speed in order to deal with a virus on the ship. And Bones had to come up with a serum. They don't call it a VC, they call it a serum, which implicates blood. Take care and be safe, you guys. I'll see you tomorrow morning.